Welcome to the blue belt level of our Pharos Digital Dojo. In this belt level, we refer to our blue belts as the hopeful experimenters. And again, we're on the journey from our white belt overwhelmed observer to our double black belt empowered advocate. In the hopeful experimenter, by the time you get here, you've covered the white, yellow, orange, and green. And what that means is you've hopefully by now built the confidence, and your first thoughts here are ChatGPT might actually help me. So we've built that solid foundation of experimenting and practicing. We understand some practical operations. And here we're really going to get into my favorite use case, which is using ChatGPT to create standard operating procedures. So that is our insight. AI, ChatGPT, will be the foundation for your new standard operating procedures. We'll cover a lot about standard operating procedures, SOPs, and in particular, how powerful they can be in your business. So the clarity moment here is we want to break down manual work into atomic automatable steps. And there's a few books here that have influenced me, none more so than The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. I'll be honest, I didn't read it for the longest time because I didn't want to build a sales machine. I don't want to be in sales or anything like that. It wasn't my area of expertise. But when I read it, it tore my brain apart in a wonderful way, because Chet Holmes talks about things that really matter to me, like pig-headed discipline and determination. He talks about time management, and above all, he talks about creating a workshop to enhance the workflows in your business. So it is, in fact, a very powerful book for a business leader, not just for a sales leader. Now, the cool part is when you build your business right, the sales come naturally. So Chet Holmes, The Ultimate Sales Machine. Obviously, I was influenced by the work of Michael Gerber, the E-Myth Revisited, and that pretty much that entire E-Myth series. Again, I used to think systems and processes were something done to me, but really they're something I do for myself. They're here to free me up from the mundane day-to-day so I can focus on my highest and best use of time. Gino Wickman's Traction, that one felt a little more practical for me. I started to really embrace it. And then I met David Jennings and read his book Systemology. And again, that was mind-shattering just in terms of how to simply and easily create systems and processes. And working with David a little bit, I had the pleasure of understanding the simpleness of SOPs. And honestly, the piece that was always missing was artificial intelligence, and I'll explain that. Now, the final book that drives me and that I found really, really helpful here is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And there's a couple things he talks about in the book. Obviously, habits. And what I love is if we train people and we teach them how to internalize what we do so that it becomes a habit, they don't have to remember to follow our checklists. They don't have to remember to do the things we tell them. They just do it. So habits, I believe, are critical. And then, of course, we want this to be fun. So I build a little bit of gamification in. Now, back to SOPs and what they do and why they're important, and why AI is the missing piece. I believe that a good system, whatever that system is, our employees will rise or fall to the level of our systems, not to the level of their abilities. So great systems allow great employees to do great things. Terrible systems sorry, but nobody's going to do great things. So the idea of the SOPs is to take our rock stars, turn them into a little bit of a, let's call it a training model. They're going to walk through, say, here's what I do here, here's why I do it, here's this, here's that. We record it, we transcribe it, and then we use AI to examine it and optimize it. And again, the beautiful thing about employees is, let's pretend there's only three bands. There's the underperforming, the below average, there's the range around average, and then there's the high performing above average. My goal with a good set of SOPs is that we take some of the weight off of our rock stars. They should be able to, if they develop best practices and we optimize what they do, they should be able to perform at an even higher level consistently. And again, we can take some away friction that slows them down. Our average people should become slightly better, if not better. They're not going to become rock stars overnight, but we can improve them. And the best part is we can even improve our below average. So overall, our average keeps shifting higher and higher as we optimize. So systems, I used to resist them. I have ADHD and it felt like it was crippling me. It was too much to do. However, what I realized was I internalized my own SOPs. So why wouldn't I internalize ones that work rather than the ones that just felt right? So I actually now personally design my workflows around my brain to work with my brain. And I encourage all of you to think about that as well. The really cool part is with SOPs, once you have them, then we can tailor our training for each employee so that they learn and master those skills as well. And then the final thing we get to is growth. We are going to shift from using AI for one-off tasks to building lasting systems. So again, the greatest drain of entrepreneurial time and energy is one-off tasks. What we want to do is look at our business, identify the things that we should do, the things that will drive our business forward, and we're going to build systems around that. And I think David Jennings probably gave me this, solidified it the best. We need to look at what generates cash in our business, do more of that, and look at the things that waste cash in our business and do less of that. So we're going to look at the cash flow through a business and we're going to optimize. Basically, we want to welcome the cash into the business so that we can scale and grow. And the mantra we want our hopeful experimenters to pick up is, I want to stop doing the same manual work twice and just automate it. Now, in the Blue Belt, we are ready to tackle stage 4, which is the hopeful experimenter. And here we're going to shift from systemizing prompts to systematizing entire business workflows and achieving the crucial leap to true delegation. And I will share my eliminate, automate, delegate because it is critical. So in this belt, you will learn to delegate to ChatGPT. You're not just asking it to produce work, you're asking it to help you. Basically, it becomes an extension of your employees. And we'll talk about this throughout the belt program. I believe that artificial intelligence combined with authentic intelligence gives us something magical called augmented intelligence. And so we're going to focus on the things that you are really good at, and we're going to help you become better at that. Now, there are some coaching programs where they say you need to work on your weak spots. I don't care about weak spots yet. The reality is, if we build in the systems and the habits for you to augment your strengths and to become almost superhuman, actually, in fact, superhuman, in the areas where you are already strong, we can hire other people to fill in gaps where you have weaknesses. So for clarity, we will identify the most high leverage tasks to automate And for growth, our goal is to consistently save hours of work every week. Now, mindset is our very, very first badge. And before we get into the belief and awareness of the mindset, I'm going to share what I call my Eliminate, Automate, Delegate framework, EAD. And think of this as a one directional, I think in project management, they call it cascade or waterfall. But the reality is the order is critical. And this is where ChatGPT and AI in particular can be really helpful. We are going to first and foremost identify the tasks in our business that we must eliminate. And the reason for this is based on root cause analysis. It's based on Pareto Principle. But the first thing we must do is eliminate. And the Pareto Principle tells us that 20% of our effort yields 80% of our result. So one of the things we look at is the wasted time, energy, attention, and money that is going into our business. And believe it or not, I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who are accepting of the fact that they have to work 80 hours a week. Hustle culture is real. I believe it is false reality. It's a choice. But basically, I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who are intensely busy because they don't know what they should be focusing on. So they try to get it all done. And believe it or not, when I first started in business, I was working 80, 100-hour weeks. I managed that for about 3 years straight before my health completely gave out and I fell over. I spent 4 days sick in bed. I had this massive fever, and my wife wanted me to go to the hospital. To be honest, I didn't tell her this, but I wanted to die at home. I genuinely thought that was it. When I was finally better and able to get out of bed, I went to see my doctor, and my kidneys, my liver, everything, my pancreas, most of my major organs had a major event. She said some of them had shut down. So yeah, you can try to work yourself to death. I really don't recommend it. So we use the Pareto Principle to eliminate. And by the way, ironically, now that I look back, I was being mentally lazy working 100-hour weeks. I just figured my body could handle it physically, so why not? But I never once asked, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? I was always busy. And to be blunt, I had employees. I don't know why I bothered, because I was the hero who had to swoop in and save the day. So eliminate, we're identifying the things that are not in our best interest to do. They're not our highest and best use of time. They drain our energy, they steal our attention, and ultimately us doing them costs money. So that's eliminate. We want to eliminate at least the 20% of our activities that cause 80% of our personal headaches. So I'm a double-banded Pareto user. I apply 20%. I look to the top 20% and see what I can optimize. The bottom 20%, what can I eliminate? So I always do it in tandem. For you, we're going to focus on eliminating the bottom 20% of your activities that drive 80% of your headaches. Now, once we've eliminated all that we can, and the reason we eliminate is if we scale ourselves and we're working 100-hour weeks and we're crazy busy and we don't know what our priorities are, if we hire employees, we've effectively scaled inefficiencies, ineffectiveness. We're going to scale busy, and that's just a recipe to go broke faster. I promise. Been there, done that. Let's talk about it. Okay, so once we've eliminated, the next step is automated. And again, Pareto Principle tells me that 20% of our automations will save us 80% of our time. I'm looking for that 20% to get the big wins early. So I want to identify the things that I do normally because I do them, and if we take away my habit, could we automate it? Now, one of the things I want to say about automation is automation, in my humble opinion, is here to facilitate relationships, not replace them. So automation should free up your time so that you can have more one-to-one with your clients, with your employees, etc. So we're going to automate what we can to free us up for the critical relationship building pieces. And then, of course, we have the delegate. And by the way, this is where most people abdicate instead of delegate. They're so burnt out, they throw it at an assistant and say, here, you do it. That's not delegating. Delegating, and you would do this if you were in your right mind, if you were relaxed and calm. Delegating, we sit down with the person and say, here's what I think success looks like. Tell me how you would do it. So you're empowering the employee to have a little bit of free will. And by the way, we'll show you how to do delegating right with ChatGPT. But typically you're delegating to somebody who knows how to do the thing or who has some ideas about it. So that's where we get to delegating. And now I'm going to get into the mindset. But the reality is, delegating is not literally just to a human. It could also mean to a virtual team member who is a custom GPT. My personal preference is I like to delegate to a human who's augmented by artificial intelligence. Again, we talked about artificial intelligence plus authentic intelligence gives us that augmented intelligence. So we want to give our people the tools they need to be stronger, better at their jobs. So the core focus for Blue Belt is transitioning from asking ChatGPT to do something to delegating a task to the AI. And we'll explain that some more. The insight here is we need to recognize and realize that trust is the ultimate leverage. So whether you recognized it or not, in our green belt and prior belt levels, we were teaching you trust on two levels. One, you had to trust yourself to delegate to ChatGPT, and two, you had to trust that ChatGPT was doing the work you wanted it to do. And that's why we're focusing on strengths. If you're looking at something you're strong in, you know a good from a bad result instinctively. So we recognize that true delegation, whether it's to another human or to AI, requires a leap of faith. And it's a willingness to hand over a multi-step task entirely and only audit the final output, trusting the AI process that you designed. So we will get into process design. I will share how I build SOPs. Basically, I have a process for creating processes, and it's really, really meant to be simple. For every process, there are the inputs. What do we need to give the team member, whether it's AI or human? What do we need to give them to make sure they can complete the tasks or the steps? The second thing they need is the process steps. What are the exact steps we would follow to get a consistent result every time? And then once we followed the process steps, we have a feedback loop. And sometimes we have quality control before feedback, sometimes feedback after quality control. We mix it up. So quality control might come first, it might come second. But basically, once we have our process steps, we need to have both quality control. How do we make sure our desired deliverable is in fact being delivered? And how do we get feedback from the stakeholders to make sure we're meeting their needs? And by the way, this is my pet peeve of old reports. People would write them based on what the writer wanted to share, not necessarily what the intended recipient required. So again, we have our inputs, we have our process steps. quality control, feedback loop. And feedback is critical. And what I love about ChatGPT as a collaborative partner is we can embed the feedback and we can actually incorporate it. And then once we've met quality control and we've gotten feedback, then we have our output or our desired deliverable, and that completes the loop on that. Now, the really cool thing is, I believe this should feel like collaboration. The old days of preparing a report, delivering the report, and leaving, I think now we can really become partners with our clients by engaging in that formal documentation and having a conversation. So we're going to show you how to build processes, and we're going to show you how to delegate them to AI. This is the fun belt. Believe it or not, all that came before is really preparatory work. We're now getting into the leap forward, exciting stuff. So under clarity, for our handoff contract, we're going to define the inputs, the processes, the quality control, the feedback loop, and the desired deliverables of one task that you currently manage. We encourage you to look at something that takes you maybe an hour a day, an hour a week, and basically the formal documentation we create is the contract between you and your assistant. And by contract, I just mean this is how we do this, and we're going to follow it. Now, if you build the system right, your ChatGPT should be able to take unique inputs, follow the process steps, and give you expected desired deliverables based on your quality control and feedback. And so for growth here, your first thing is a full task release. You're going to select a high leverage task, something that, like I said, takes you over 60 minutes a day, and you're going to commit to not touching the manual steps for 1 week. You're going to rely solely on your new AI-driven workflow. Now, I want to be clear. I've said this before. I will say it again, I promise. You are the adult in the room. We are going to pick a high leverage task that you know how to do well. It's time consuming, it's maybe tedious, it's repetitive, and you do it frequently. So we're looking at a high frequency task, and we're going to automate it as much as we can. And for the record, automation includes the human in the loop. You are the final and last say on quality control. This does not go out the door until you put your stamp on it. But basically, you're testing your system to make sure it works. And I say you're not going to touch the manual steps for the week. That's not to say if AI doesn't get it right, you need to step in and correct it. Again, that's where the feedback loop comes in. It is not done until you say it's done. So there's some high publicity cases. A large international accounting consulting firm prepared a report for a very large client. The report was very public facing, and for some reason their systems broke down because the report was full of glaring errors, factual, structural, etc. And basic human quality control was clearly not done. So multiple systems failed there. The workflow was not created properly. Quality control was not done at a deep enough level. The key to ChatGPT, you're the adult, trust and verify, and feel free to question. If you don't question, I guarantee it someday it will come around and bite you in the backside. So once we've mastered our mindset, then we get into skill set. And here is where we start to look at the tools and the techniques. And basically our core focus is translating standard operating procedures into prompt-based workflows. And again, I talked before about our input, process steps, quality control, feedback loop, outputs. That's my 5 stages, and I will vary those slightly, but that is generally almost always my 5 stages. And as I said, sometimes I invert feedback from quality control. It really depends on the type of workflow we're looking at. Now, if you do not have standard operating procedures, the great news is we can delegate that to ChatGPT. Now, I will be cheeky. We first eliminate, then we automate, then we delegate. So some of the things in our business we should eliminate altogether. Some we can automate and some we delegate. Interestingly, for the automate and the delegate, we need that same systems thinking to create those SOPs. And by the way, if you don't believe SOPs have a place in your business, I'm going to say right now that you probably will also agree AI doesn't really have a place in your business, because it is literally, if you think about it, it's about following a process to get an output. If you're not willing to create a process for that, and by the way, I write books, I write a lot of books. I have a process for how I write a book so that my books are consistent in structure. The content is always different, but the structure is consistent. So have SOPs for everything that makes sense. Like I said, if we can eliminate something, we don't need an SOP for it. But the main thing is we need SOPs for every piece of our business that generates cash. That's our first priority, because once we get the cash brought in and we have cash consistently coming in, then we can look at optimizing other areas of the business. So the insight at the blue belt level for skill set is we need to understand that SOPs are really just complex prompts. And in the green belt, we taught you a single template. Now we're going to expand that into a sequential chain of prompts to handle an entire business process. And it's kind of weird, but to me, I realized all software is really a system for doing things easily. So even word processing software, we see these magic letters on the screen, we do our thing, and then magically we print and we have a well-formatted document. There's a system going on behind the scenes, and the best systems make complex things feel simple. So if you look at Google Docs or Microsoft Word, it seems simple. We type a letter, it shows up on the screen. Oh, I'd like to bold it. Okay, let's highlight it and select the bold option. In the old days, you had to type a weird special prompt before and after the word to be bolded so that you knew it was bolded. Now it's just click, click, click. There's icons. So in Clarity, we will focus on workflow decomposition. I don't know why, but in university many years ago, I loved flowcharts. And I loved the logic of them because it allowed me to visualize how something worked before I actually even touched it. And believe it or not, if you can visualize it, sometimes you can see where it's broken before you even really truly understand what's going on. So we're going to pick that 60-minute task we talked about in mindset, and we're going to break it down into a sequential multi-step workflow that requires at least 3 distinct dependent prompts. So for example, prompt 1 might be analyze data, prompt 2 might be draft content, prompt 3 might be to format a final report. And by the way, when I'm writing my books, I always use ChatGPT to help me with a general outline, very, very simple. And then I get into a detailed outline, and then I start to write, and then I compare my writing to that outline to make sure I'm on track and I'm meeting my goals for it. So Whatever your workflow is, we can break it down into sequential steps. And there's two things I have my people watch for here. If you have the word and in a process step, that almost always means you have two steps in one. So we're looking for and if we have it, we need to break that step into two, or we need to find a way to make it simpler, because and is still adding complexity. We need to break it down. Now, the other word that can destroy a workflow in a heartbeat is or. So if you see or in your workflow, that represents a decision to be made, whether it's a conscious decision or not. Or means at this stage we do option A or option B. So we need to define that is a decision tree. We need to define what causes us to pick option A versus option B. And then we need to branch out and say, okay, option A, here is how we do this. Option B, here is how we do that. So I see a lot of beginner SOPs that are littered with ands and the word or. And literally, that's where people get confused and they trip. If you confuse ChatGPT, you can cause a lot of gibberish just with those two words, and or. So our job is to make them simple and identify and eliminate and or. So under growth, we're building out our process chain, and the goal is to successfully execute the full 3-step sequential prompt chain and achieve a final deliverable that is 80% complete and ready for final human quality assurance. Again, do not skip human quality assurance. I create a lot with ChatGPT. We co-create. My wife once said, "Did you write that with ChatGPT or did you write it?" And I said, "Yes, I wrote it with ChatGPT. I wrote it and ChatGPT assisted me." So think of ChatGPT as a collaborative partner, but recognize it is just a tool. You are still the human who makes the final call and says, yeah, this is ready for the world, or we better send it back, it's not quite ready. Next, we have our gear set badge. This is where we get into systems and flow. And our core focus for gear set is actually integrating AI with other digital tools to automate data transfer. Now, I'm going to be honest, I will allow you to do as much or as little of the automation as you're comfortable with, because of the risks that come with using too much automation. I've seen it go crazy where people automate too much and they lose sight of what the outcome is. We're going to automate what makes sense, no more and no less. And as an example, I use a lot of automation within the Google ecosystem. So certain actions, if somebody submits a form, that triggers an analysis of their form submission. I can self-grade some of them, and when they pass or get a different result, I can set an email to go out based on their results. That kind of automation is amazing, and I do it all the time. There's other automations I'm not ready for because, again, I'm still testing the connections between machines. Something like ChatGPT, there's a lot of potential for security, so I'm still cautious. I am not ready to give the keys to the kingdom completely to AI, so we'll get into that. But I want you to see as an insight that ChatGPT is a connector, not an island, and the greatest time savings can come from eliminating leaky buckets, the manual steps of copying and pasting data between multiple systems. Again, I use student assessments. I use Google Forms, Google Sheets, Google Docs. I can use automation to move data from one to the other so that I have it. So as an example, if somebody submits a form in Google Forms, I get the data collected in a Google Sheet, and from the Google Sheet, that data goes into a Google Doc, which makes it human readable and a little nicer and more user friendly. And then I can have a dialogue with my user in that Google Doc. So this is as much about automation as it is about using AI. And I will make you aware of, for clarity, the API awareness. And basically, API is how software communicates with one another. It's an industry standard. There's new protocols coming, but we're going to research and identify one action or API integration available for your preferred, let's call it workflow, not just your AI, but for workflow. It can be generally connecting two tools or more that you use, and we can connect your workflow to an external data source like Google Sheets, a CRM, or Notion. Now, here I will point out there is the purity of going into the actual APIs and making connections, or there is the easy route. I don't care which route you take, find the one that works for you. Tools like Zapier or Make.com or N8N make integration between other tools much easier. However, you give up some control and you give up some complexity. So me personally, I play a lot directly with APIs. I will not teach you how to do that in this course because it becomes way above your level very quickly. But here for growth, we're looking at a basic integration test, and we're going to execute a prompt that requires ChatGPT to successfully pull, process, or push data to or from an external system, thereby automating one point of manual data transfer in your multi-step workflow. So a couple of my favorite uses, if I have a whiteboard and I've done some brainstorming, and assuming my writing is legible enough, big assumption some days, I can take a picture of that, upload it to ChatGPT, ask it to transcribe, and then my brainstorming on the whiteboard, I can start looking for patterns in it using ChatGPT. Saves me a lot of time. The other thing I do a lot of, and I will make sure you all know how to do this, I will import data from either spreadsheet, a document, whatever, and I'll analyze it in ChatGPT. So I'm not retyping things, I'm just pulling things in. I'll share some of my shortcuts and time savers. Now we have 2 badges left. The community badge is about collaboration. And the core focus here is sharing complex workflows and managing your delegation risk. So again, if you're taking this, I assume that you are at the level you're meant to be at. You're comfortable, you're starting to try new things, you're getting into systems and processes. The number one mistake I see people making is focusing on workflows on their own. And the reason I say that is we can get into these little bubbles where we think we're doing wonderful things. Our systems are always better if they're tested by other people. So the insight here, we want to show you that process transparency mitigates risk. We're going to focus on documenting and sharing delegation workflow to allow peers to spot potential errors or points of failure before they impact a high stakes deliverable. And again, you're the adult. Do not release anything until you have given it your signed seal of approval. And here again, I am a big fan, and the reason I created the dojo is iron sharpens iron. So we're not here to criticize, we're not here to nitpick, we're not here to hurt anyone's feelings. What we're here to do is say, you know what, I think that there's a risk there. For example, if I was using this slide and I was creating a process where it says documenting and sharing, that would not be one single line in my workflow. It should be 2. What does documenting mean? What does sharing mean? And basically what we're doing with our peer review is you want somebody who can ask you questions and say, I don't understand what that word is. Could you define it? And by the way, key definitions are almost always a good input into a process. There is industry jargon that we expect people would know if they're in our industry. However, if somebody's new to our industry, what don't they know coming in that's going to confuse them? And this is where your peers are asking you questions, and you're not here to defend your SOP. You're here to identify feedback that will make it better. So we want to plug holes, we want to fill gaps, we want to take it from 10-foot leaps to 1-foot steps forward. So we're not doing big leaps of faith here in the process. We should be following a step-by-step checklist almost. So for clarity, we will work on a workflow blueprint that works for you. Do not try to live up to the standard or the use that works for me. The key is it's got to work for you and it's got to work for your team. So I'm a big fan of clean visual blueprints. I love flow charting. I love simple numbered lists. Mind maps work well sometimes. But basically, we're going to map it out so that it clearly labels what the human does and what the ChatGPT does at each step. And by the way, I like my people. If I'm going to delegate something, I will have human prompts, which are really just questions that they need to be thinking about as they do their task. And the goal is that those questions guide them and help them understand. I also include AI prompts so that I can either give it better feedback or get a better deliverable from it. But ultimately, if something is consistent, for example, old days, we posted on blogs religiously. I don't know if anybody does anymore. I think now it's more about social media content, but basically we might have an input, which would be our topic or our style, etc. And the output might be a 1,200 word LinkedIn post. We need to help ChatGPT understand how to turn that topic into that post, and we need quality control. And by the way, my number one quality control is I have a persona or an avatar that the content is created for, and I always ask, would this help that person? Would it add value to them? If it doesn't, nothing else matters. We go back and redo it. And now for growth, we've got the delegation coach. Here you're going to share your workflow blueprint with the rest of the Blue Belt community, and you're going to coach one peer through that process from step to step. And basically, you're going to record that and you're going to explain common pitfalls, quality assurance checkpoints, etc. And what we can do is take that recording, transcribe it, and use it with ChatGPT to improve your process even further. So in this case, you're demonstrating your workflow. The next step, which we won't do today, is you're then going to give it to somebody who doesn't know anything about the role and see if they can follow it step by step by step and deliver the result you're hoping for. That's when you finally start to free yourself from the repetitive, time-consuming tasks, when you've eliminated, automated, and now you're able to delegate. Our final badge for the Blue Belt, as always, is the Attitude Badge. And here is where we are learning and practicing respect and consistency. So respect applies to respecting ourselves, respecting our peers, and respecting our tools. We need to respect what each can do and know what is available, know how to monitor and enforce quality control. And of course, we're building habits, we're becoming consistent. So the core focus of Blue Belt and this is where our attitude badge comes in, is we're going to scale time saved to hours and blocks of work. So in the blue belt, this is not a belt to rush through. This is, in my opinion, the most exciting belt because it's where you're going to see time freedom. We're going to find blocks of time that are blocks of work that are time consuming, repetitive, mundane, and we could eliminate, automate, or delegate. So the insight here is that discipline scales time. The consistency, and if we use our tools consistently from the green belt and now into the blue belt, we're looking at liberating a significant amount of time, proving to ourselves the strategic value of AI. I'm going to be honest, in the early belts, it probably feels a little bit like you're playing with AI. And really, I hear a lot, people are concerned about the time spent. Here, we're starting to see time saved. So my goal is for people, identify one task that takes an hour a day and find a way to eliminate, automate, delegate, and then tackle the next thing in your calendar that takes the most time in your week and find out what you can eliminate, automate, delegate, and so on. And believe me, if you don't know what you do in a week, that's probably the first sign that you need help. But really, truly, I have yet to meet somebody where we couldn't pull out 10 hours from their week. And so what we do, my goal is we'll take 10 hours. I call that hell. There are things we should eliminate, automate, or delegate. And then we're going to add back 6 hours of heaven. And I have this relative value of time. We don't get into it here yet. But basically, we're looking for high value, high leverage activities that drive our business forward almost exponentially. There is a book by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy called 10x is easier than 2x. I promise you they're right. Reality is, and this sounds overly simple, do not throw things at me. You can double your business simply by doubling your work hours. If you know what produces revenue, double that revenue producing time and you've doubled your revenue. Problem is, you're going to burn out. You're going to work harder than you want to. I don't recommend it. But 10x, it's easier because you have to find the leverage in your business. So 2x, you can double your business with your own sweat and labor, the sweat of your brow sort of thing, blood, sweat, and tears, and there will be tears. Or 10x, you have to find a new way of doing things, and that will exceed your current thought, your current mindset. So 10x, all you have to do is shift your mindset. 2x, all you have to do is double how hard your poor body is willing to work. So we define, for clarity, we define that reclaimed hour, and we're going to monitor roughly the number of hours you're saving weekly by automating your first high leverage task. And my goal for you is to then reinvest some of the time you save into finding the next task and the next and the next. And basically what you're doing is Pareto Principling your calendar until you're only focused on the highest and best use of your time. And again, we want to define what you will do with that reclaimed time. So our goal for growth is that you have a 30-day flow. And what we want you to do, again, it doesn't need to be 30 consecutive days. It could be 30 business days, but successfully and consistently run that multi-step delegation workflow for 30 days while logging, and just, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a Post-it note, hours saved, so that you can prove that you've consistently freed up a significant portion of your work week. Now, full disclosure, you may need 30 days, you may need a week to prove to yourself that this works. If you need longer than 30 days, you're probably missing the mark a little. Ask people in the dojo what they're doing. But really, truly, my goal by the end of 30 days, everybody should have found at least 10 hours a week that they can eliminate, automate, or delegate permanently. So that is the goal for the blue belt. I want to thank you for hanging out with me and learning the theory behind our blue belt. If you want to join the Digital Dojo, you can go to pharosbusiness.com/digital-dojo. We look forward to seeing you inside the dojo. Thank you.